Chapter 4. The Balance. People create their own problems and obstacles, and then waste time and energy trying to overcome them. Contrary to popular belief, transurfing shows that the reason for all of our problems lie on a different plane. How can we eliminate problems from our lives? Care about it, don't worry about it. Excess potential. Everything in nature strives towards a state of balance. Drops in atmospheric pressure are balanced by the wind. Differences in temperatures are compensated with heat exchange. Anywhere that there can be an excess potential of any energy, balancing forces appear to eliminate the imbalance. We're so used to this being the normal state of affairs that we don't even ask ourselves, why is it this way? Why does the law of balance work? There's no answer to this question. Overall, laws do not explain anything, they only state the obvious. All laws of nature are secondary to the law of balance, which is the primary law, at least it seems so. Therefore, it is not possible to explain why balance should exist in nature. To be more precise, it is impossible to explain where balancing forces come from and why they exist. After all, just because we are used to some phenomenon doesn't mean that it is exactly how things happen. We can only guess what the world would be like without the law of balance. Would it turn into some kind of formless jelly or into scorching heat? The fact is, we don't really know. We simply have to accept the law of balance and stare in amazement at how perfect the space around us is. We're used to having good and bad luck in life. We are also used to the idea that success is always followed by failure. These are manifestations of the law of balance. After all, success and failure both upset the balance. The world is full of constant fluctuations, day and night, high and low tide, birth and death. Even in a vacuum, elementary particles are continuously dying and being reborn. In the end, everything strives towards balance and is controlled by the law of balance, including the complex system of pendulums. In fact, the entire world can be viewed as a collection of pendulums where some are swinging higher, others are dampening, and all are interacting with each other. Each pendulum receives impulses from its neighbors and gives them its impulses in return. You yourself are also a kind of pendulum. If one day you decide to upset the balance and make a sudden swing in direction, you will create annoyance in neighboring pendulums, which will then turn against you. The balance can be upset not only by actions, but by thoughts, and not just because thoughts usually precede actions. As you know, thoughts radiate energy. Even in the material world, everything is based on energy. And everything that happens on the invisible energy level is reflected in the world of visible material objects. A simple way to think of it is this: if an excess of energy potential appears, balancing forces arise to eliminate this potential. Thought energy gives rise to excess potential when you give an object too much significance. For instance, in one situation, you're standing on the floor in your room, and in the other, you're standing on the edge of a cliff. The first alternative doesn't bother you at all, but the second situation is very significant to you. Take one wrong step, and something irreversible will happen. On the energy level, the fact that you are simply standing has the same significance in both cases. But because you are on the edge of a cliff, fear arouses tension in you, causing you to create an irregularity in the energy field. Balancing forces appear immediately to eliminate this excess potential. You might even be able to feel their effect. On one side, a mysterious force pulls you down, while on the other side, a different force pulls you away from the edge. For the excess potential of your fear to be eliminated, balancing forces have to either pull you away from the edge or throw you off the cliff. On the energy level, all material objects have the same significance. We are the ones that give them specific qualities, good or bad, happy or sad, attractive or repulsive, simple or difficult. Everything in this world is subject to our evaluation. By itself, evaluation does not create any irregularity in the energy field. When you are sitting in an armchair, you evaluate the situation. Sitting here is safe, but standing on the edge of a cliff is dangerous. In that moment, however, the cliff does not concern you. You simply evaluate the situation, and the balance is not upset in any way. This is because an excess potential only arises if you give unreasonably great significance to an evaluation. The magnitude of excess potential grows if your evaluation of significance greatly distorts reality. In general, if the subject is important to you, you cannot evaluate it objectively. For example, an object of worship is always full of virtues, whereas an object of hate is always full of flaws, and an object of fear is always full of terrifying qualities. But in actuality, thought energy is artificially trying to create a quality that was never there in the first place. Excess potential is being created, which stirs up the wind of balancing forces. Attributing too much importance to things distorts realities in two ways: by giving the object excessively negative or excessively positive characteristics. By itself, a mistaken evaluation plays no role whatsoever. A displaced, incorrect evaluation creates excess potential only if your evaluation is of great significance to you. Only things and situations that are important to you personally can provide your evaluation with energy. Although excess potential is invisible and intangible, it plays a large and even treacherous role in our lives. The action of balancing forces and eliminating this potential gives rise to most of our problems. The treachery lies in the fact that we often get a result that is the opposite of what we intended. In fact, we usually don't understand what is actually happening. Why is this? Why do the things we wish for always slip away? There is an erroneous opinion that if we devote ourselves completely to something, we can achieve outstanding results. From the point of view of balanced forces, it's apparent that to be immersed in your work means putting this same work on a scale and weighing it against everything else. The balance is disturbed, and you don't have to wait long for a result that is the opposite of what you expected. If working harder to you means making more money or becoming more qualified, then of course you have to make an effort and nothing terrible will happen as a result. But you've got to know when to stop. If you are constantly exhausted and work becomes a nightmare for you, then you need to slow down or change your job. Excessive efforts definitely have a negative outcome. Let's take a look at how this happens. Besides work, you have other things that you value: your house, your family, entertainment, your spare time, and so on. If you put your job above everything else, then you create strong excess potential. And because everything in nature strives towards balance, forces will manifest to balance out the excess potential, regardless of your will. These forces can act in varied ways. For example, you get sick, so there can be no talk about work until you get better. Maybe you get depressed. After all, you are forcing yourself to do something that has become a burden to you. Your mind keeps telling you, come on, you have to get up, go to work, and earn some money. But your soul, the subconscious, is wondering, is that really why I came into this world? To suffer and endure all kinds of pain? What do I need all this for? You eventually end up with chronic fatigue syndrome, which puts an end to the possibility of doing a job. It's like pulling the devil by the tail. Meanwhile, you notice other people around you who are achieving greater results with less effort. It turns out that having reached a certain level, the significance you attribute to your job starts maxing out. The more weight your work has for you, the more problems you get. It seems to you that having all these problems is just the normal order of things. The truth is that you will have fewer problems if you simply lower your bar of importance. There is only one conclusion to draw from all of this. To eliminate excess potential, you need to consciously review your attitude to work. It is necessary for you to have some time off from your job to do what you like. Those who don't know how to relax don't know how to work either. When you are at work, rent yourself out. Give your job your head and your hands, but not your heart. The pendulum of work wants and needs all your energy. But you came into this world not just to work. You can be much more productive at work if you eliminate your excess potential and free yourself from pendulums. While renting yourself out, make sure to act impeccably. Don't let yourself make even the smallest blunders that may allow others to accuse you of recklessness. Renting yourself out does not mean being slack and taking no responsibility for your actions. It means being detached, not creating excess potential, but at the same time doing everything that is asked of you down to the smallest detail. Otherwise, you may be in for a bumpy ride. For example, there are always people around you who bury themselves in their work. They will sense subconsciously that you are renting yourself out, that you are no longer working hard, even though you are still managing to get a lot of things done. These diligent folks will intuitively start looking for an opportunity to catch you making a mistake. As soon as you make a mistake, they will throw themselves on you. Whatever mistake you make, it will probably be insignificant and therefore humiliating when your colleagues point it out. Something like you being late for work, forgetting something, or having missed something. When you were engrossed in your work, they overlooked your mistakes, but now they accuse you of not caring enough about your job. Similar situations arise in your family or among friends. Therefore, when you are renting yourself out, whatever situation it may be, it's necessary to perform your duties flawlessly. Let your inner observer, the overseer, come to your aid. Otherwise, you will plunge into the game again. Your inner observer doesn't mean a split personality. You're simply noting to yourself in the background what you were doing and how you were doing it. You might object to the idea of renting yourself out, wondering if you should instead work excessively and in that way avoid excess potential. Well, this idea of putting your heart and soul into something depends on the task at hand. Burying yourself in your work can be justified in only one situation, when the work itself is your goal. But there is a difference between a goal and having your goal. When you are simply working for someone else, work takes your energy. But when the work is your goal, it serves as a tunnel leading to success. It pumps you with energy and fills you with inspiration and satisfaction. If you're among those rare happy souls whose work is like this, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. Dissatisfaction and Judgement. Many people are dissatisfied with themselves and their achievements. If your flaws take on great significance for you, then excess potential gets created and balancing forces try to eliminate this potential by having you struggle to develop your virtues or to overcome your weaknesses. Depending on your nature, you get pulled in one of these two directions. Most people choose the struggle with their weaknesses, and it inevitably turns against them because eliminating your weaknesses is difficult to do. Consequently, you get the opposite result, and the situation becomes worse. For example, you try to hide your timidity and only become either more timid or unduly familiar with strangers. If you are dissatisfied with your achievements only to a point that it pushes you towards self-perfection, this does not disturb the balance of forces. The world around you is not seriously affected, and the interchange in balance is compensated for by positive actions. But if you start wallowing in self-reproach and resentment towards yourself, or even worse, if you start punishing yourself for whatever it is you don't like in yourself, then a dangerous situation happens where soul and mind come into conflict. But your soul never deserves this kind of treatment because it is perfect and self-sufficient. All flaws and weaknesses that you have acquired are the flaws and weaknesses of mind, not of soul. When you are in conflict with yourself, reason prevails and the soul withdraws into itself, which can devastate your life. Therefore, it is important to let yourself go and forgive yourself for your flaws and weaknesses. If you cannot love yourself, then at least stop fighting with yourself. Accept yourself as you are. This is the only way your soul will be an ally to your mind, and it is a powerful ally indeed. As long as you fight a war against your weaknesses, you waste energy by giving it to a harmful excess potential. But when you turn away from this struggle, that energy is released and can be redirected at developing your virtues. Even though this sounds simple, many people waste an enormous amount of energy struggling with themselves, trying to cover up their imperfections. They are like titans who have doomed themselves to bear this burden all their life. If only they would allow themselves to get rid of this heavy burden and just be the way they are, their life would get much simpler and easier. Their energy would be redirected away from the struggle with flaws and weaknesses to the development of virtues. If they did this, the parameters of their radiation would correspond to life tracks where virtues triumph over flaws and weaknesses. Think about it. How can you ever move to the life track where you are in good physical shape if all your thoughts are focused on your physical flaws? You can't, because your negative thoughts inevitably lead you to what you don't want. When you are unhappy with yourself, you get into a conflict with only your soul. But when you are unhappy with the world, you get into a conflict with a large number of pendulums, and there is nothing good in being under their spell, nothing useful in trying to wage war against them. Dissatisfaction is a material radiation. Its frequency corresponds with life tracks that pronounce your weaknesses even more. When you feel yourself being pulled towards these tracks, you become more dissatisfied, and this continues until you get to the track where you are old, sick, and incapable of changing anything. The only thing left is to try to find comfort with other people like you who spend their time and energy either whining about the world or reliving memories of how good everything was in the old days. Every generation is convinced that life is worse now. But no, life is worse only for those who are used to wallowing in their dissatisfaction with this world. It is a depressing picture, isn't it? There is also another aspect to this habit of showing dissatisfaction, which is that it upsets the balance of forces. Whether your dissatisfaction is justified or not, it creates an excess potential in the energy space around you. This potential gives rise to balancing forces that strive to restore the balance. It would be great if these forces worked to make things better, but unfortunately, things usually happen the other way around. Balancing forces try to besiege you so that your complaints about this world will be of as little weight as possible. This is much easier for them to do than to change everything you were displeased with. Imagine what would happen if a ruler started actively expressing his dissatisfaction with everything that was happening in his state. It's not even important whether his motives were good or bad. Such a ruler would be removed or even physically destroyed. The entire history of humankind confirms this. The action of balancing forces is directed at decreasing the influence you have on the world around you. This is extremely easy to do using all sorts of methods. For instance, by relieving you of your obligations, your job, your salary, your home, your family, and your health. It is no accident that older generations end up with a life that is worse than it was in the past. You might argue that since balancing forces act to diminish the excess potential of dissatisfaction, which is a negative feeling, then the opposite should also be true. In other words, it would seem that if you were happy with the world around you, then balancing forces would do whatever it takes to ruin your party. But this only happens if your joy turns into wide-eyed enthusiasm. According to the law of transurfing, you transmit creative energy that transports you to positive life tracks. This energy does not create destructive excess potential, which balancing forces strive to eliminate. It's not by accident that different philosophical and religious interpretations of life have all come to the same conclusion that love, in its general sense, is the creative power responsible for the existence of our world. Well, balancing forces were created by this same power, and they strive to support order in this world. They cannot turn against the very energy that also created them. The habit of expressing dissatisfaction with things stops you from getting what you want. The opposite is also true. The habit of constantly experiencing little joys for the most varied and insignificant reasons will get you what you want. This can mean only one thing: that you must substitute your old habit with the new one. How can you do this? Well, it is very simple. First, as trivial as it may sound, any misfortune is a blessing in disguise. If you make it your goal to find something good in things that appear negative, you will reach your goal without further effort. Turn it into a game. If you play this game constantly, your old habit will quickly be replaced by a new one. This habit is of great use to you and a nightmare for destructive pendulums. Secondly, if something terrible happens and the idea of feeling joyful about it seems unnatural and inappropriate, do as King Solomon did. He wore a ring with an inscription on the inside that was not visible to others. When something bad happened, or when Solomon found himself in serious trouble, he would read the inscription inside, which read, "This too shall pass." The habit of expressing dissatisfaction has been developed by mankind due to the influence of destructive pendulums. With new habits, you'll generate positive energy that will carry you on a powerful stream to positive life tracks. Suppose that you now get inspired by your possibilities and start practicing the technique of substituting habits. Here's what will happen. Soon you'll notice that you're practicing less and less often, and that you simply forget all about wanting to change your habits. This is unavoidable because old habits are deeply rooted in you. As soon as you start slacking off, a pendulum will immediately find a way to upset you, and you won't even notice that you've just fed it your energy. Don't despair. If your intention is strong, you'll achieve whatever you want, and the destructive pendulum will, in the end, leave you in peace. You just need to remind yourself about your intention more often. We are all guests in this world. Nobody has the right to be the judge of what he himself didn't create. This affirmation should also be applied to your relationship with pendulums. If you start acting against destructive pendulums that made you dissatisfied in the first place, you only make things worse for yourself. You don't have to be a meek little sheep, but you don't have to openly confront the world either. If a pendulum is acting against you personally, you can try to let it fall through or try to extinguish it. Whatever happens, don't let it get you into a battle with other pendulums. Like the man in the gallery who doesn't like the entire exhibition, don't judge, don't complain, don't argue. Just walk into another room that you do like. Dependent relationships. The other side of being dissatisfied with the world is to idealize it. Looking at the world through rose-colored glasses makes many things seem better than they really are, but when you think something exists when it does not, you create excess potential. To idealize means to overrate, to put on a pedestal, to worship. Love is the force that creates and directs the world, and it is different from idealizing because it remains passionless. Unconditional love is a feeling of endearment without ownership, of admiration without worship. In other words, it does not create a dependent relationship between you and the object of your affection. This simple formula can help you determine where feeling ends and idealizing begins. Imagine you are walking in a mountain valley that is overflowing with green plants, lustrous trees, and flowers. You admire the wonderful landscape, take in the fresh aroma, and feel that your soul is completely happy and peaceful. This is love. Then you start picking the flowers. You tear them out from their beds and crush them with your hands without thinking that they are alive. Then the flowers slowly die. Later on, it occurs to you that you can make perfume and cosmetics out of flowers, or that you can sell them, or maybe you decide to create a cult of flowers and worship them as idols. This is idealizing. A dependent relationship is created between you and the object of your former love, the flowers. Nothing is left from the love that you felt when you were simply enjoying the scenery in the mountain valley. Love generates positive energy that carries you to a corresponding life track, while idealizing creates excess potential, giving rise to balancing forces that strive to eliminate the excess potential. The action of balancing forces is different in each case, but the result is the same. Basically, it can be characterized as removing the halo. This always happens if you idealize something or someone, and depending on the object and the level of idealization and whether it produces a strong or weak result, it is always a negative force that requires the balance to be restored. If love turns into a dependent relationship, excess potential is unavoidable. Your desire to have what you do not have creates a change of energy pressure. Dependent relationships are identified by set conditions, such as, if you do this, then I will do this. You can find plenty of similar examples. If you love me, then you'll abandon everything and come away with me to the end of the world. If you won't marry me, then it means you don't love me. If you praise me, then I'll be friends with you. If you won't give me your toy shovel, then I'll kick you out of the sandbox. The balance is also disturbed when you compare or contrast something to something else. We are this way and they are different. For example, national pride, comparing one nation with others, or the feeling of inferiority, comparing yourself to others. When something is set in contrast to something else, balancing forces start eliminating the potential. Positive or negative doesn't matter, because you are the one creating the potential, and the action of balancing forces will either pull apart the contradictory parts or unite them in confrontation. All conflicts are based on comparisons and contradictions. At first, fundamental declarations are made, such as, they're not like us. It then develops into, they have more than us, we need to take it away from them. They have less than us, we must give it to them. They are worse than us, we must change them. They are better than us, we must wrestle with ourselves. They act differently than we do, we need to do something about that. All these comparisons lead one way or another to conflict, beginning with personal, emotional discomfort and ending with wars and revolutions. Balancing forces then try to eliminate the conflict through reconciliation or confrontation, and because they get more energy from confrontation, pendulums will always try to manipulate events in that direction. Idealizing and overestimation. Overestimation means attributing personal qualities to someone who does not have those qualities. On a mental level, this may seem harmless, but on the energy level, it creates excess potential. Potential is created wherever there is an overflow of quantity or quality, and overestimating is exactly that. It is the creation of mental models of qualities that do not exist. This can happen in two ways. One way is when you attribute qualities to someone that are not his own. To eliminate this discrepancy, balancing forces must produce a counterweight. For example, a romantic young man imagines his beloved to be an angel of pure beauty, but in reality, she is quite the material girl, likes partying, and is not at all interested in sharing the young man's dreams of love. He idealizes her and puts her on a pedestal, but eventually, the halo will come off and his heart, his dream, will be broken. The other way is when there is no object to attribute the illusions to. In other words, you are just dreaming about an imaginary ideal person. You have your head in the clouds trying to escape a reality that seems unattractive. In the process, you create excess potential. In this case, balancing forces confront your romantic notions with harsh reality. Here's another example of overestimation. Suppose a woman draws a picture in her mind of the ideal husband. The more she convinces herself that he must be exactly this way or that, the more excess potential she creates. And only a guy with the opposite qualities to those of her perfect husband can destroy this excess potential. Without understanding why, she gets exactly what she doesn't want. The opposite can also happen. If a woman actively hates drunkards and rude people, it is as if she puts herself in a trap of getting together with an alcoholic or rude fellow. She gets what she cannot stand because she is radiating thought energy on the frequency of the thing she dislikes, which in turn creates excess potential. Life often brings together completely different people who are unsuitable for each other simply because balancing forces are trying to extinguish the excess potential by having opposites of excess potential attract each other. The action of balancing forces is especially evident in children because they are more sensitive than adults to changes on the energy level. As a result, they act naturally. If a child is given too much praise, he immediately starts acting up out of spite. And if you ingratiate yourself to him, he starts despising you, or at least not respecting you. If you use all your strength to raise a toddler to be well-behaved and obedient, he is likely to end up hanging out with a dodgy street gang. If you try to make some kind of genius out of him, he'll probably lose interest in school. And the more you drag your child to all kinds of after-school activities and societies, the more likely it is that he'll grow up to be a dull person. The best way not to create excess potential when raising or relating to children is to treat them like guests. In other words, you be attentive to them, show them respect, and give them freedom of choice without allowing them to walk all over you. As much as you are a guest in this world, so you should treat children as guests. Having a positive attitude towards others is almost as widespread as having a negative attitude. There is some balance in this case. There is love and there is hate. A smooth, positive attitude does not result in excess potential. Potential forms only when there is a displacement relative to the nominal value. Unconditional love can be considered a 0 on the scale of displacement because unconditional love doesn't give rise to dependent relationships and doesn't create excess potential. But that type of love in its purest form is rare. Generally, a dash of possession, dependence, and overestimation get added to love. It's hard to refuse the right of possession because possessing your object of love is completely natural as long as it doesn't lead to one of two extremes. The first extreme is the desire to have someone who doesn't belong to you at all and who doesn't even suspect your desire. This is the classic case of unrequited love, which has always given rise to suffering. However, the mechanism behind this is not as simple as it seems. If you love and admire flowers, it never occurs to you whether or not they love you. Why should they love you? Meanwhile, if you're burning with desire to hold them, but you cannot because that's forbidden in the park, it is clearly no longer love. What remains is a dependent relationship with negative emotions that are creeping up on you. In this case, the object of your love is in one place, you are in another, and you want to possess the object of your love. As a result, you create excess energy potential. You might assume that this potential would pull the desired object towards you, just like air masses that move from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. But no, balancing forces don't care which way a balance is achieved. They will do whatever it takes to restore the balance. For example, they may move the object of your love farther away and neutralize you, that is, break your heart. Over time, you will be more and more prone to dramatizing the situation. He or she doesn't love me, and such thoughts will drag you onto a life track where mutual love becomes almost impossible. The stronger the desire to possess someone you love, or for your feelings to be reciprocated, the stronger are the balancing forces. Of course, if they choose an option that brings you closer to your loved one, then the story will have a happy ending. It is easy to determine the direction of balancing forces when you start to realize that you are in love. If you are really worried about whether your love will be reciprocated or not, and if something isn't right from the beginning of the relationship, then you need to radically change your tactics. More precisely, you need to start loving without demanding a reward in return. Only then will the fluctuations of balancing forces be pulled over to your side and start working for you. Otherwise, the situation will spin out of control like an avalanche, and then it will be almost impossible to change anything. It seems contradictory, but if you want your feelings to be reciprocated, then you need to love and not try to be loved. In this way, no excess potential is created, which means you do not have to worry about the 50% chance that balancing forces will work against you. Secondly, if you don't strive for reciprocating love, you won't have uncontrollable, dramatic thoughts about unrequited love, and your radiation won't drag you to the corresponding life tracks. On the contrary, if you simply love without the right of possession, then the parameters of your radiation will fit those life tracks where reciprocation exists. This is because there are no dependent relationships in reciprocated love. If you already possess something, there is no point in getting upset about the right of possession. Just imagine how much your chances of reciprocated love will increase simply because you have refused the right of possession. Besides, unconditional love is extremely rare, and that alone is already intriguing and attractive. Wouldn't it be nice if someone loved you without demanding anything in return? The second extreme of the right of possession is, of course, jealousy. In that case, balancing forces have two ways of acting. If the object of love already belongs to you, the first way is to bring you even closer. In fact, some people like it when their partner is jealous, to a degree, of course. However, balancing forces have another option, which is to ruin that which gave rise to jealousy in the first place, namely love. The stronger the jealousy, the deeper will be the grave of your love. Contempt and vanity. Judging other people is one of the most effective ways to upset the balance of forces, particularly if in your judgment you despise other people. On the energy plane, there are no good or bad people. There are only those who obey the laws of nature and those who upset the status quo. In the end, the latter always fall under the influence of forces that strive to restore the disturbed balance. Never despise people, no matter what, because due to the action of balancing forces, you may find yourself in the place of the despised person. To balancing forces, it is an easy, direct way to restore a lost harmony. Do you despise bums and poor people? You could lose your home and your money, and then the balance would be restored. Do you despise people who have a physical disability? No problem. An accident can be arranged for you. Do you despise alcoholics and drug addicts? You could easily find yourself in their place. After all, these people are not born that way. Circumstances in life have forced them into becoming who they are now. Why should you be exempt from similar circumstances? Never condemn your colleagues at work. In the best case, you'll make the same mistakes. In the worst case, a conflict may spring up that won't bring you anything good. Even if you were right, you could be fired. If you condemn another person just because you don't like him or the way he is dressed, you find yourself on the ladder of good and bad, except that you will be one step below the person you are condemning because you are emanating negative energy. There is nothing wrong with priding yourself on your successes or being in love with yourself. A general love for oneself is self-sufficient and doesn't disturb the balance. The balance is disturbed only when your inflated self-esteem adopts a scornful attitude toward the weaknesses, flaws, or achievements of others. Your love and pride then turn into vanity, which draws the attention of balancing forces. Contempt and vanity are human vices that animals don't have. They are guided by expedient intention and thus fulfill the will of perfect nature. Wild nature is more perfect than thinking man. A wolf, like all predators, does not feel hatred or contempt towards its prey. Try to feel hatred or contempt about a hamburger. But people build relationships with one another mainly on excess potential. The greatness of plants and animals is their lack of awareness of their greatness. Consciousness gives man many useful advantages, but it also provides for destructive elements such as vanity, contempt, and the complexes of guilt and inferiority. Superiority and inferiority. Feelings of superiority or inferiority are both dependent relationships. When you compare your qualities to the qualities of others, you inevitably create excess potential. On the energy level, it's not important whether you express your superiority publicly or simply congratulate yourself in secret. When you compare yourself to others to your advantage, you artificially assert yourself at the expense of others. This always creates excess potential that balancing forces have to react to. We usually perceive nuisances, problems, and obstacles as integral parts of the world, as necessary companions in this life, but the fact is that having trouble is an anomaly, an abnormal phenomenon. It turns out that most troubles are brought on by balancing forces working to eliminate the excess potential that we or people around us create. We don't realize that we create this excess potential, that we have to accept the problems it causes, and that this is simply the nature of balancing forces. But you can free yourself from most of your problems if you free yourself from the energy you spend supporting excess potential. A huge amount of energy is not only spent in vain, it is spent turning balancing forces so that results are the opposite of what you intend. A good example is when you compare yourself to other people and worry about your position on the ladder of superiority. When you free yourself from this preoccupation with your own importance, then you avoid a battle with the influence of balancing forces. As a result, you have fewer problems and become more confident in your own abilities. The same thing applies to your efforts to control or manipulate the world around you. This is another area that you have to keep your thought energy away from. This is because attempts to change your surrounding world not only disturb the balance of forces, but also affect other people to some degree. And that is not what you were trying to do. In fact, a central aspect of transurfing is that it allows you to choose a destiny without disturbing or interfering with other people's destinies. Fate truly is in your hands, but only in the sense that you are given the ability to choose it, not to change it. And when you think about it, this is much more effective than forging ahead, trying to overcome all obstacles in your path. Many people make the mistake of acting as if they can create their fate in the literal sense, but there is no place for battles in transurfing, which is a big relief. Of course, the opposite of the superiority complex is dwelling on your faults and belittling your virtues. But balancing forces don't care whether you create excess potential in a positive or negative form. The degree of balancing forces that your excess potential brings into play is simply proportional to how much your evaluation of yourself and the world differs, positively or negatively, from reality. Balancing forces will also cause you to behave unnaturally, and surprisingly, in a way that highlights the weakness you are trying to hide. For example, teenagers can be defiant and disrespectful. In doing so, they are simply trying to make up for their adolescent insecurity. On the other hand, shy people may act as though they are outgoing or impudent, but it is not natural. They do it only to hide their shyness. But all these attempts to fight your weaknesses and flaws are in vain. It's hopeless trying to fight low self-esteem. The only way to avoid its consequences is to eliminate the hang-up itself, which is difficult to do. Trying to persuade yourself that everything is great is also pointless. You can't really fool yourself. Preoccupation with your flaws, especially in comparison to other people's virtues, works the same as trying to display your superiority. And the result will again be the opposite of what you intend. Don't imagine that everyone is attributing the same significance to your deficiencies as you are yourself. Actually, everyone is preoccupied with themselves. Therefore, you can easily throw this giant weight off your back. Excess potential will then disappear, balancing forces will stop aggravating the situation, and energy will be released. Instead of fighting your flaws or trying to hide them, learn to compensate for them with other qualities. For example, lack of beauty can be compensated with charm. There are people who are physically unattractive, but as soon as they start talking, their listeners become enthralled. Physical flaws can be compensated with self-confidence. Just remember how many great confident people in history were physically unattractive. The inability to communicate with others can be replaced with the ability to listen. Everyone, just like you, is preoccupied with themselves and their own problems, and a good, sincere listener is rare. And here's a special piece of advice if you are shy. Protect this quality of yours as you would protect a treasure. Shyness has a hidden charm to it, and once you decide to stop fighting it and changing it, it will no longer be a clumsy quality. You will even notice that people start to like you. Here's another example of compensating for your flaws. The imagined need to be cool often pushes people to imitate others who have achieved the status of a cool guy. Yet mindless imitation of somebody else's script creates nothing more than a parody. Everyone has his or her own script. You just need to choose your credo and live by it. The leader in a group is simply the one who lives according to his credo. He becomes a leader because he is free from the obligation of having to ask others how he should act. He doesn't need to imitate anyone. He simply has a worthy opinion of himself, he knows what he is doing, and he doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. Hence, he is free from excess potential. In any group, the individuals that become leaders are those who live according to their own credo. If a person frees himself from the weight of excess potential, he has nothing more to defend. He is internally free, self-sufficient, and has more energy than those around him. These advantages, in comparison to other members of the group, make him a leader. The desire to have and not to have. The more you want, the less you'll get. When you want something so much that you are ready to risk everything you have to get it, you create an enormous amount of excess potential. In response, balancing forces throw you onto a life track where your desired object doesn't exist at all. The energy behind the behavior of a man who is obsessed with desire is like a wild boar trying to catch a bluebird. He wants the bird so badly that he's drooling just thinking about it, snorting and rooting about impatiently. Naturally, the bird flies away. If the boar had simply been strolling near the bird, not paying any attention to it, he would have had a pretty good chance of grabbing it by the tail. There are 3 forms of desire. The first is when a strong desire turns into a determination to have what is desired and to act accordingly. Then the desire is fulfilled. Moreover, the potential of the desire disperses into space because its energy is spent on performing the action. The second form is inactive, tormenting desire, which represents excess potential in its purest form. It hangs there in the energy field, and in the best case, it simply wastes the energy of the sufferer. In the worst case, it attracts all kinds of problems. The third form of desire, when a strong desire turns into dependence on the object of desire, is the most insidious. This is because attaching great significance to a desired object automatically creates a dependent relationship, which gives rise to strong excess potential. And strong excess potential automatically summons balancing forces to extinguish it. Usually, people make up conditions in their minds, such as, if I achieve this, my situation will improve dramatically. If I don't achieve this, my life will lose all meaning. If I do this, I'll show myself and everybody else what I'm worth. If I don't do this, I'm worthless. If I could get this, it would be great. If I don't get this, it will be very bad, and so on. Once you become dependent on the object of your desire, you are drawn into such a violent whirlpool that you get exhausted trying to possess the object. In the end, you do not achieve anything and you just abandon your desire. The balance gets restored and balancing forces remain indifferent to your suffering. And all of this happens because of your strong need to have that desire fulfilled. The desire remains on one side of the scales while everything else is on the other. Your wish can be granted only if it takes the first form. That is, when the desire is transformed into pure intention, free from excess potential. We are used to paying for everything in this world. Nothing is free. But in reality, we only pay off debts from the excess potential that we create ourselves. Everything is free in the space of variations. The absence of importance and dependent relationships is a kind of payment. You can only buy fulfilled wishes using this payment. To transfer to a life track where the desired object is transformed into reality, The only thing necessary is the energy of pure intention. Pure intention combines desire and action without any excess importance. For example, your unconditional intention to go down to the local newspaper stand for a magazine is pure intention. The more you value an event, the more likely it is that things will fail or go wrong. If you attribute great importance to what you have and cherish it dearly, then balancing forces will probably take it away. If what you want is way too important for you, then don't hope to get it. You first have to lower the bar of significance, the bar of importance. For example, you've got a brand new car that you're absolutely crazy about. You blow off little specks of dust and protect it carefully. You're terrified of any little scratch. Basically, you adore and worship your car. As a result, you create excess potential. After all, you are the one attributing such great importance to your car. But in fact, its importance on the energy plane is equal to zero. And as a result, balancing forces soon find some schmuck to smash up your car. Or being overly careful yourself, you bump into something. Once you stop worshiping your car and start treating it like an ordinary object, then the risk of something happening to it is significantly minimized. Treating something like an ordinary object doesn't mean neglecting it or being careless. It means taking perfect care of your car without idolizing it. The desire to have something has another aspect to it. There is the notion that you can get whatever you want if you want it badly enough, that a strong desire will bring you onto a life track where it will be fulfilled. But that is not the case. If your desire transforms into dependence, into some kind of psychosis, or if you hysterically strive to get something regardless of the cost, then somewhere deep inside you, you don't believe in the fulfillment of your desire. Consequently, you transmit thought energy with strong interference. When you don't believe in the fulfillment of your desire, you try as hard as you can to convince yourself that the opposite is true. Hence, you push the excess potential even higher. There is even a risk of spending your entire existence on your life work. The only thing to be done in this case is to reduce the significance of your aim. Go for it the same way you go to a newspaper stand for a magazine. The strong desire to avoid something is a continuation of being dissatisfied with the surrounding world or with yourself. The stronger the need, the more powerful the excess potential will be. The more you don't want something, the more likely it is that you will confront it. Balancing forces are indifferent to the way balance is achieved, and there are two ways of achieving it. One is to get you away from whatever it is you are trying to avoid. The other is to force you into contact with it. It's better to consciously stop trying to avoid it so that no excess potential is created. But that's not all there is to it. When you think about what you don't want, you emanate energy on the track where it will definitely happen. You always get what you actively don't want. Here is an example. A man attends a grand reception at the embassy where everything is pompous, refined, and delicate. Suddenly, he starts waving his hands wildly, stamping his feet, and screaming that he does not want to be taken out of the reception immediately. Naturally, security guards appear and grab the weird fellow who resists and cries as he is escorted away. Of course, this is an exaggerated example, but on the energy level, this is exactly what happens. Here is another example. Suppose you are awakened up in the middle of the night by a noise your neighbors are making. You really want to sleep, you have to go to work tomorrow, but it seems like your neighbor's party is just getting started. The more you want them to shut up, the more likely it is that the party will go on. The angrier you get, the more violent and noisy the party becomes. If you start hating them to a certain degree, it's guaranteed that such nights will become more frequent. To solve this problem, you can apply the method of making the pendulum fall through or extinguishing it. You can extinguish the pendulum if you see the situation as ironic. You can also just ignore the situation without displaying any emotion or interest in it. Then the pendulum will fall through and no excess potential will be created. You simply take comfort in the awareness that you have a choice and know how to use it. Soon the neighbors will settle down. The key is to analyze the situation and determine whether you are overestimating the significance of it and what problems that is causing. If things are terrible, never mind the overestimated significance for now. Shake off your dependent attitude and start persistently transmitting some positive energy. The worse it is, the better. For example, if you feel that you've suffered a great defeat, be happy. In this case, balancing forces are on your side because their job is to compensate bad with good. It can't be bad all the time, just as it can't be good all the time. No one can spend their whole life flying on the wave of happiness. Feeling guilty. Feeling guilty is excess potential in pure form. To balancing forces, good and bad deeds are equivalent to each other. The balance is restored in every case whenever excess potential is created. You've done something bad. You become aware of the nature of your deed. You then feel guilty. I should be punished. Excess potential is created. Or you've done something good. You become aware of the nature of your deed, and then you feel proud of yourself. I should be rewarded. Excess potential is also created. Balancing forces don't have an idea of why someone has to be punished or rewarded. They simply eliminate the imbalance in the energy field. The payment for feeling guilty is always punishment of one kind or another. If you don't feel guilty, then the punishment may not come. Being proud of yourself when you have done something good also leads to punishment, not reward. This is because balancing forces have to eliminate the excess potential of pride, whereas a reward would only reinforce it. When other people make you feel guilty, the excess potential is squared. It is enough that your conscience bothers you, but now you must also bear the wrath of the righteous ones. But the biggest excess potential that comes from feeling guilty is the innate tendency to imagine that you are always the one to be blamed for everything. Having a guilty conscience like this ruins your life because even though you are inventing your guilt, you are constantly under the influence of balancing forces that must constantly punish you for your imagined wrongdoings. On the other hand, balancing forces don't do anything to people who don't feel guilty about their bad deeds. It seems that justice should prevail and punish them, but nature doesn't have a sense of justice. On the contrary, decent people with an inherent feeling of guilt are the ones who always face misfortune, while shameless, cynical scoundrels get away with almost anything without being punished, and sometimes by even being rewarded for their efforts. So don't torture yourself with a guilty conscience. It won't help. It's better to act in such a way that you won't feel guilty later. The feeling of guilt also serves as a string by which you can be pulled by pendulums, and in particular by manipulators. Manipulators are people who act according to the formula. You should do what I say because you're guilty, or I'm better than you are because you are wrong. Such people try to impose a feeling of guilt onto their charges to gain power over them or for their own self-assurance. On the outside, manipulators appear proper. Their concepts of good and bad were established long ago. They always speak true words, thus they are always right, and their actions seem flawless and entirely proper. Of course, not all proper people have a tendency to manipulate. So where do manipulators get their need to lecture and control? It is conditioned by the doubts and uncertainties that are constantly tormenting their hearts. They skillfully hide this inner struggle from the world as well as from themselves. Their lack of an inner core of strength, which truly proper people possess, forces manipulators to seek self-assurance at the expense of others. The need to lecture and to direct others stems from their desire to strengthen their own position, which they do by belittling their charges. Thus, dependent relationships are created. It would be wonderful if balancing forces gave the manipulators what they deserve. However, excess potential only arises where there is tension. When a charge gives his energy to a manipulator by doing what he is told, there is no excess potential, and the manipulator is free to act as he wants and get away with it. As soon as someone indicates that he is ready to take on the feeling of guilt, the manipulator will immediately stick to this person and start sucking his energy. To avoid this influence, you simply have to refuse feeling guilty. You're not obliged to justify yourself to anyone, and you don't owe anything to anybody. If you are at fault, you can bear the punishment as long as you don't remain the guilty one. If you are prone to justifying yourself out of a feeling of guilt, you have to stop doing that. If you do, the manipulators will know that there is no way they can hook into you, and soon they will leave you in peace. By the way, the feeling of guilt is the primary cause of the inferiority complex. If you feel inferior in something, it means this inferiority is created when you compare yourself with others. From the beginning, you are predisposed to take the blame, regardless of the situation. Basically, you agree to be the guilty one. And if that is the case, you are agreeing to the fact that you can be found guilty and punished. When you compare yourself to others, you give them the right to be superior to you. You hand them this right and allow them to think that they are better than you. They probably aren't even thinking so in the first place, but you are. In effect, you are judging yourself for them. It is only natural then that people start judging you because you are putting yourself on trial. Instead, take back your right to be yourself and get up from the chair of the defendant. No one will dare judge you if you don't consider yourself guilty. Only you can give them the privilege of being your judge and jury. If for only a second you consider yourself guilty of being worse than others, they will feel it simply because you create excess potential when you feel guilty. The opposite is also true. If you are free from feelings of guilt, no one will think of self-asserting themselves at your expense because there will be no excess potential. There are two other interesting aspects to feeling guilty: power and courage. People who feel guilty always subject their will to the will of people who don't feel guilty. If you are potentially ready to admit to being guilty of something, subconsciously you're ready to endure punishment, and thus you're ready for subordination. On the other hand, if you never feel guilty, but you have the need to assert yourself at other people's expense, you're ready to become a manipulator. Everyone decides for himself or herself what to do with their conscience. For example, rulers and leaders have the least developed sense of guilt. And feeling guilty is a foreign concept to cynics and other people deprived of conscience. Their method is to wade through, walk over, and slaughter other people. It's not surprising that unscrupulous individuals often come to power, although this doesn't mean that power is bad or that all people in power are bad. The other aspect of feeling guilty is boldness, which is a sign of an absence of any feeling of guilt. The essence of fear lies in the subconscious. Fear is caused not only by the frightening unknown, but by the dread of punishment. If you are guilty, you theoretically agree to bear punishment, and therefore you are afraid. Indeed, brave people are not tormented by their conscience. They don't suffer from the least sense of guilt. They have nothing to be afraid of because their inner judge has declared that they are right. The opposite is true for timid victims who subconsciously think, "I'm not sure I've acted correctly. I could be considered guilty, and everyone has the right to punish me." Even the tiniest, weakest, most deeply hidden feeling of guilt opens the subconscious gates for punishment. If you feel guilty, it means you agree, in theory, that all sorts of thieves and robbers have the right to attack you, and therefore you are afraid. People have come up with an interesting way to dissolve the excess potential of guilt, namely by asking forgiveness. And it actually works. If you carry the feeling of guilt inside, you are trying to retain negative energy and are thus pumping up the excess potential. When you ask for forgiveness, you release the potential and the energy dissipates. Asking for forgiveness, admitting your mistakes, confessing your sins, all these are methods of getting rid of the excess potential of guilt. It is important, however, to make sure that your remorse doesn't turn into a dependence on manipulators. They are just waiting for this to happen. In asking for forgiveness, you admit your mistake in order to release the excess potential. Nevertheless, manipulators will remind you of your mistake later to provoke you back into feelings of guilt. Don't give in to their provocations. Otherwise, the excess potential that you released through forgiveness will come back again. Refusing to feel guilty is also an effective way to survive in an aggressive environment, in jail, in a gang, in the army, on the street. It's no accident that the criminal world has the unspoken rule of trust no one, fear nothing, don't ask for anything. This rule urges them to avoid creating excess potential. You might think that the best way to protect yourself is by demonstrating your strength, but this is a general method of dealing with things. A more effective way is to avoid feeling any sense of potential punishment from your subconscious. Here's an interesting example. In the former Soviet Union, political prisoners were intentionally jailed with common criminals as a way to break their spirits. But what happened was that many of the political prisoners, because they were remarkable individuals, did not allow themselves to become victims of the harassment and persecution. Not only that, they earned respect and authority among the criminals. Their personal independence and dignity were valued more than their physical strength. Many people have physical strength, but strength of character is a rare phenomenon. And the key to personal dignity lies in the absence of any feelings of guilt. Anton Chekhov, the renowned Russian writer, once said, "Drop by drop, I am squeezing the slave out of me." In other words, he was struggling to get rid of his feelings of guilt. He was fighting against guilt in himself. In transurfing, however, there is no place for struggling or forcing yourself to do something. It is simply a matter of learning to say no. That is, to choose. You don't have to squeeze guilt out of yourself. You just have to live in accordance with your own credo. No one has the right to judge you. You have the right to be yourself. If you allow yourself to be you, the need to justify yourself will no longer be relevant, and the fear of being punished will fade away. And then something remarkable will happen. No one will ever again dare to offend you. In prison, in the army, in a gang, at work, on the streets, in a bar, nowhere. You will never again end up in a situation where someone threatens you with violence because you've thrown out the feeling of guilt from your subconscious. On that life track, scripts for violence simply don't exist. Money. It's hard to love money without trying to possess it and without forming a dependent relationship to it. Be happy if you have money, but don't ever kill yourself for not having enough money or for overspending it. Otherwise, you will have less and less of it. If you don't earn much money, your typical mistake will be moaning about how there is never enough money. The parameters of such a radiation correspond to financially poor life tracks. It is especially dangerous to give in to the anxiety that you will have less and less money. Fear appears to be one of the most energetically rich emotions. By being afraid of losing money or being afraid of not earning enough, you transfer to a track where there actually is less and less money for you. Once you fall into this trap, it's not easy to get out, although it's possible. To escape the money trap, you have to eliminate the cause of excess potential which you yourself created. And what causes this excess potential is usually an extreme desire to have money or to rely on money, that is, to be dependent on it. For starters, accept what you have and be satisfied with it. Remember that it could always be a lot worse. You don't have to reject the desire to have money. You just have to accept the fact that money is not flowing to you like a river. Look at your situation like someone who can at any moment become incredibly rich or lose everything he has. Many pendulums use money to attract adherents. In particular, it is pendulums that have led to the widespread fetish about having and needing money. Pendulums have created the myth that to get something, you need the means of money. In this way, your aim gets substituted for and superseded by money. Instead of thinking about your aim, you think about money and thus fall under the influence of an interest, a pendulum, that is alien to you. You no longer understand what you personally want from your life and instead join the useless race for money. It is profitable for pendulums when things go this way. You work for an alien pendulum and never get much money because you're serving somebody else's goal. Many people find themselves in this situation, which strengthens the myth that wealth is a privilege of the few. The truth is that anyone could get rich as long as he is pursuing his own goal. Money is never the goal and is not a means for reaching your goal. It is only an accompanying attribute. The goal is what you want out of life, such as to live in your own house and grow roses, to travel around the world, to catch trout in Alaska, to go skiing in the Alps, to raise horses on your own farm, to enjoy life on your own island, to become a movie star or an artist. It's obvious that certain goals can be achieved only if you have a bag of money, so the majority of people do exactly that. They try to get this bag. They think about money and leave the goal itself in the background. In terms of transurfing, they try to transfer to a life track where the bag of money awaits them. But when you're working for somebody else's pendulum, it's hard to get the bag of money. In fact, it is impossible. So what happens is that you don't get any money and you never reach your own goal. It cannot be any other way because your thought energy is directed at an artificial replacement and not at your true goal. If you believe your goal can be achieved only if you are rich, send that requirement to hell. Suppose you want to travel around the world. It's obvious that to do that you need a lot of money. But to get what you want, you need to think about the goal itself and not about money. Money will come by itself because it is a complementary attribute. It sounds too simple, too impossible, but it's true. Pendulums pursuing their own benefit turn everything upside down. The goal is not achieved with the help of money, rather money comes to you on your way to your goal. The strong influence of pendulums has given birth to all manner of deceptions and myths. For example, the notion that a man has to become a major industrialist or banker or movie star, and only then can he become a millionaire. However, only those people become millionaires who have their goal, not wealth, on their mind. Most people act the opposite way. They serve someone else's goal, or they replace their goal with an artificial substitute, or they reject their goal because they don't have the money and therefore believe that they do not fulfill the condition of being wealthy. In reality, there are no limitations to wealth and riches. You can want absolutely anything and get it. On the other hand, if the goal of having something has been imposed on you by a pendulum, you will get nothing. The important thing to understand is that money is nothing but a complementary attribute on the way to your goal. Don't worry about the money. It will come to you automatically. The main thing is to lower the importance of money so that no excess potential is created. Don't think about the money. Think only about what you want to get. At the same time, you should not ignore money. You should treat it carefully. If you see a minor coin on the street and you are too lazy to pick it up, then you don't value money at all. The money pendulum will not be predisposed towards you if you treat its attributes carelessly. Also, don't worry when you are spending money. Money is fulfilling its mission when you buy something. If you have made the decision to spend some money, don't regret it later. Trying to save up a sum of money and spending as little as possible only produces a strong potential. The money is accumulating in one place and doesn't go anywhere. In that case, it's likely that you will lose everything. Money should be spent sensibly so that there is some movement in the energy field. In a place where there is no movement, excess potential will appear. It is no coincidence that wealthy people get involved in charitable organizations. That is how they reduce the excess potential from their accumulated wealth. Perfection. From childhood, we are taught to do everything thoroughly, carefully, doing our best. Children are taught to be responsible and to distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad. Without a doubt, this is the way it should be. But all these notions become so deeply rooted in the hearts of zealous pendulum adherents that they become an obsession and a constant struggle. Guess what you are struggling with? Balancing forces, of course. By always having the aim for everything to be perfect, you create complications on the energy level. You live in a world of extreme evaluations, which in turn create excess potential. There is nothing bad about trying to do your best in everything, but if you make it overly important, then balancing forces will be right there. They will simply ruin everything. In addition, this will create a backward loop and you will get more and more obsessed with perfection. You want perfection, but get the opposite. So you desperately try to fix everything, but then everything gets even worse. In the end, striving for perfection turns into a habit and, in some cases, a mania. The life of a perfectionist turns into a constant struggle, and this automatically poisons the life of those around him because a perfectionist is demanding not only of himself, but of others. If you are not involved in the situation yourself, you can see the absurdity of someone trying to be perfect in everything, terrorizing everyone around him. But the perfectionist grows so much into his role that he thinks he is the one without sin, flawless, and right in everything he does. This feeling of being right about everything is deeply rooted in his subconscious. Of course, such a perfectionist is easily tempted to act as the supreme judge of humanity, deciding how and what all the lost souls should be doing. After all, the feeling that he is always right justifies his judgments, and his righteous desire to set everyone else on the correct path gives him motivation to embark on his crusade. In short, he gives himself the right to judge and condemn other people. In reality, of course, such a trial doesn't go beyond common preaching and accusation making. On the energy level, however, powerful excess potential develops. The judge takes on a mission, deciding how other foolish people should act, what they should think, what they should value, and what they should strive for. And if one of them decides he has his own opinion on the subject, then he needs to be put in his place. And if he shows any resistance, then he has to be put on trial, sentenced, and labeled so that everyone knows where he stands. Of course, the truth is that we are all guests in this world, that everyone is free to choose his own path, and that no one has the right to condemn or judge others. The idea of striving for perfection seems innocent in the beginning, but ends with someone claiming the privileges of a master. In that case, the resistance of balancing forces, even in the form of minor problems, grows stronger. If the disturber of balances is under the protection of a pendulum, he may for a limited time get away with his perfectionism. But eventually, the time will come to pay the bills. When a guest forgets that he is only a guest and pretends to be the host, he can be thrown out. Importance. All of these things, guilt, money, perfection, stem from excess potential that comes from attributing too much importance to things. Importance represents excess potential in its pure form, and to eliminate this potential, balancing forces must create problems for the person who created it. There are two forms of importance: inner and outer. Your inner or individual importance can be the overestimation of your virtues or flaws. The formula of inner importance takes the form of attitudes like, "I am an important person," or "I do important work." When the arrow of your persona's importance goes off the scale, balancing forces get to work. Inner importance can also take the form of belittling your virtues and flaws, that is, guilt. But whether your inner importance is overly positive or negative doesn't matter. The amount of excess potential is the same in both cases. Outer importance happens when you attribute too much value to an object or to an event. It takes the form of, "To me, such and such is of great importance," or "It is very important to me to do this and that." Excess potential is thus created. Virtually everything is a variation of inner or outer importance. Indignation, irritation, anxiety, worry, depression, panic, despair, fear, self-pity, guilt, attachment, admiration, exaggerated affection, idealization, disappointment, pride, arrogance, contempt, disgust, resentment, and so on. In all these cases, whenever you attribute excessive importance to a quality, object, or event inside or outside yourself, you create excess potential. You summon the wind of balancing forces and put yourself in a position to become a puppet of pendulums. To be in harmony with the rest of the world and to relieve yourself of pendulums, it's necessary to reduce excessive importance. You always have to keep watch over how much importance you attribute to yourself or to the world around you. Your inner overseer shouldn't be sleeping. When you reduce importance, you immediately enter the state of balance, and pendulums aren't able to establish control over you. After all, they can't hook on to emptiness. This doesn't mean that you should become a lifeless statue and refuse all emotions. In the long run, it's useless and unnecessary to fight emotions. If you were always trying to stay calm on the outside while your inner world is boiling over, the excess potential grows bigger. Emotions stem from attitudes, therefore you should change your attitude first. Feelings and emotions are nothing but consequences that are caused by one thing: importance. In the animal and plant worlds, there is no such thing as self-importance. There is only expediency from the point of view of balancing forces. Domestic pets are probably the only animals that experience a sense of their own importance. Yes, they too can be influenced by society. Other animals are guided only by their instincts. Importance is a human invention, and one that is a great pleasure to pendulums. Reducing your sense of inner and outer importance doesn't just decrease the number of problems in your life, it gives you freedom of choice. Yes, according to Transurfing, we already have the right to choose, but as long as we're under the influence of pendulums, we cannot use that freedom. Balancing forces and pendulums stand in our way. And because of excessive importance, we spend our entire lives struggling with balancing forces. There's simply not enough energy left for choosing, let alone for thinking about what we personally want from life. Meanwhile, pendulums are constantly trying to establish control over us and impose someone else's goals on us. Where is the freedom in that? Any form of importance, either inner or outer, is simply imaginary. None of us is of any importance in this world. But at the same time, we have access to all the riches in the world. Consider how children, when they are on the beach, splash, play, and have fun in the water. Suppose none of them imagines himself as either good or bad, the water as good or bad, or the other children as good or bad. As long as the situation remains this way, the children are happy. They're in harmony with nature. Similarly, each of us comes into this world as a child of nature. If we don't disturb the balance, we can have the best there is. But as soon as we start making up importance, problems appear. But because we do not see the causal link between our importance and our problems, it seems that the world is a hostile environment where it's not that easy to get what we want. The fact is, however, that artificially created importance is the single obstacle on the path to fulfilling your desires. From struggle to balance. Is there any way of resisting balancing forces? Actually, that's exactly what we do every day. Our entire life is a struggle with balancing forces. All difficulties, nuisances, and problems are connected to the actions of balancing forces. And in all these cases, trying to resist them is meaningless because they keep doing their thing no matter what. The only remedy against balancing forces is to eliminate the reason for their actions, namely to reduce the excess potential of importance. The one thing that everyone is busy doing is building a wall on the foundation of his importance and then trying to climb over it or get through it by beating his head against the wall. Instead of overcoming obstacles, wouldn't it be better to take a brick out of the foundation and collapse the wall? We clearly see the obstacles in our way, but to see the foundation they are all built on is not so easy. If you've encountered a problematic situation, try to determine where you've gone too far, what you've become attached to, and what you have attributed excessive significance to. Identify any excessive importance and then reject it. The wall will come crashing down. The obstacle will be eliminated and the problem will be solved without your help. In short, don't try to overcome obstacles. Reduce importance instead. Reducing importance doesn't mean fighting your feelings and suppressing them. Excessive emotions and feelings are the result of importance. If you eliminate the cause, which is your attitude to a certain event or object, you eliminate the result. It's really a matter of realizing that importance doesn't bring you anything except trouble. When you understand this, it becomes easier to reduce your inner and outer sense of importance. Reducing outer importance doesn't mean neglecting things or underestimating situations. In fact, neglect is simply importance with a minus sign. You need to have a simpler attitude towards life. Don't be careless, but don't exaggerate either. Don't think so much about whether people are good or bad. Accept the world as it is every day. Reducing inner importance doesn't mean just resigning yourselves to circumstances or enduring self-humiliation. To repent your mistakes and sins is the same as showing off your virtues and accomplishments. One is importance with a minus sign, the other with a plus sign. Remember that your remorse is useful only to pendulums that want to establish control over you. Accept yourself as you are. Allow yourself the luxury of being you. Do not exalt your virtues and do not belittle your flaws. You are not important, nor are you worthless. Strive toward inner peace. One thing that doesn't create any excess potential is a sense of humor, being able to laugh at yourself and at others without offending either yourself or them. Humor is the same as denying importance. It is actually a caricature of importance. The one golden rule you need to follow is this. Before trying to solve your problems, reduce their importance. Then balancing forces will not bother you and the problem can be solved quickly and easily. To reduce importance, it's necessary first to remember and realize that the problem exists as a consequence of excessive importance, which is putting you in the grip of a pendulum. Stop, shake off your delusions of importance, and change your attitude to the object in question. This is not difficult to do. You already know that the only thing in your way is excessive significance. The only difficulty is to remember in time that you are wallowing in inner and outer importance. To help you remember, you need to activate your overseer, your inner observer, to keep track of all your inner values. Your thoughts get captured by importance exactly the same way that muscles are involuntarily strained. For example, when something bothers you, the muscles of your back and shoulders tighten up. You don't notice the tension until you start feeling the pain associated with it. But if you remember in time and pay attention to your muscles, you can release the tension before it causes pain. In the same way, you have to catch yourself attributing excess importance as you get ready for an event. If whatever you are about to do is really important to you, don't blow it up even further. The best recipe for success is spontaneity, improvisation, and a light attitude. If you are preparing for something, do not prepare too seriously or carefully. This only boosts your sense of importance. If you worry about something without doing anything about it, this also boosts your sense of importance. But in this case, action can evaporate the potential of importance. So don't just think, act. And if you can't act, then don't think. Instead, turn your attention to something else and let go of the situation. In this way, you let go of the sense of importance. You'll be most effective in everything you do if you take the focus of attention off yourself as the person executing the action and off the end goal, and move your focus onto the process of performing the action. When you have the attitude that I am not doing important work and the work is not important, excess potential is eliminated, balancing forces do not interfere, and the action gets completed without problems. Why does it happen sometimes that you worry about an event, fear it, constantly think about it, and imagine all kinds of difficulties and problems that can happen because of that event, but in the end, everything turns out okay? Or the opposite situation where you don't care much about a future event, but as a result, you encounter unforeseen trouble. In the first case, your evaluation of the event goes off the scale in a negative direction, while in the second, it goes off the scale in a positive direction. In both cases, what you receive in the end is the accumulated action of the forces which have to balance the excess potential that you created. You might think that if you intentionally imagine the worst possible scenario of what might happen before an exam, then balancing forces will enter and give you the highest grade. But it doesn't work that way because your intention of assuming the worst is artificial. It is a product of only your mind and therefore has no energy basis. Only the intention coming from your soul can have an energy basis, which is why you can't achieve a desired result simply by visualizing it. Being in harmony. Never ever, under any circumstances, boast about what you have, even if you've earned it fair and square. And never brag about what you haven't achieved yet. This is extremely unprofitable because balancing forces will always act against you. Make yourself at home, but don't forget that you are a guest. If you are in harmony with surrounding pendulums, that is, if you are swinging in unison with them, then your life will unfold with ease and pleasure. Because you are in resonance with the world, you will get energy from it and achieve your goal without further effort. If you've gotten yourself into a situation where it's impossible to live in balance with the world around you, for example, your husband is beating you, then you should think about how to take that crucial step and change your surroundings to something different. Maybe you feel you have nowhere to go. That notion is coming from a pendulum that is trying to keep you under its control so that it can suck your energy. Remember, there is always a way out, and not only one. Just avoid any abrupt actions without carefully thinking them through. The perfect solution will come to you as soon as you reduce excessive importance and free yourself from the influence of the destructive pendulum that is bothering you. Then you can make the pendulum fall through, or you can extinguish it. Summary. Excess potential is created only if you attribute significance to an evaluation. Excess potential grows if your evaluation is distorting reality. The action of balancing forces is directed at eliminating excess potential. The action of balancing forces is often the opposite of the intention that created the potential. When giving yourself out for rent, activate your inner overseer to look after you so that you do everything impeccably. Discontent and condemnation always turn balancing forces against you. It is necessary to replace habitual negative reactions with a positive transmission. Unconditional love is admiration without the right to possess or worship. Setting terms and comparison produces dependent relationships. Dependent relationships create excess potential. For love to be reciprocated, you have to abandon the right of possession. You will definitely have to pay for contempt and vanity. Free yourself from the need to confirm your superiority. Striving to hide your flaws creates the opposite effect. Any inferiority is compensated for by your virtues. The more importance you attribute to a goal, the less likely it is that you will reach it. Desires that are free from potentials of importance and potentials of dependence will be fulfilled. Say no to feelings of guilt and to the need to justify yourself. To refuse the feeling of guilt, it is enough to allow yourself to be you. No one has the right to judge you. You have the right to be yourself. Money comes on its own as an accompanying attribute on the way to your goal. Greet money with love and attention, and part with it without regret or worry. Having said no to inner and outer importance, you get freedom of choice. Importance is the only obstacle on the path to fulfilling your desire. Do not overcome obstacles, reduce their importance. Care without worrying.